Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our webinar today, which is on the role of the NSTC in vocational training in India. My name is Tara Panchwani, and I manage the UKIBC's Policy and Research Department. I will start off with a brief introduction about the webinar. So basically, skills development is a key priority in India, recognized at the highest levels of government and industry. In order to address the skills gap challenge, the Indian government has introduced an innovative model of public-private partnership, which seeks to build capacity of training provision in India. And this is the NSTC. The NSTC stands for the National Skills Development Corporation, which seeks to mobilize training providers, international and domestic, to deliver skills development programs across the country. And it resonates very strongly with the government's Skill India initiative, which was launched in July 2015. Before we begin, I would like to familiarize you with the toolbox on the right-hand side of your screen. Just to let you know, we'll have everyone on mute during the course of the webinar to keep any background noise to a minimum. But if you do have a question, please drop it into the little bracket on the toolbox to your right in the Please Type Your Question Here section to send me your question, and I will take it up during our Q&A session at the end. For now, to make sure that you can all hear me clearly, could I please ask that you all use the Raise Your Hand button on the toolbar? If you could please click on the Raise Your Hand button now, that would be great. Okay, thank you very much. Right, moving on. I'm delighted to introduce our expert speaker today, Mr. Jayant Krishna, formerly from Tata Consultancy Services, who has been appointed as the current CEO of the National Skills Development Corporation. In this session, Jayant will give us an overview of the skills development sector in India, and in particular, the role of the NSTC. So Jayant, I'll pass it over to you now, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is Skilling India, to my mind, is one bright idea whose time has come. And, it all started with an exercise where a US professor, management guru, C.K. Prahlad, was hired. His services were retained by CII, and under a mission called India at 75. So he tried to evangelize as to what kind of country we would like to see in the year 2022, when the independent India becomes 75-year-old. And he did some gross level macroeconomic calculations and came up with this target that India would need almost 500 million skilled people by the year 2022. And after some due diligence, the government of India embraced this target, adopted the target, and that became the country's target. So this entire journey started in a serious format some 6, 7, 8 years ago, and a lot of efforts have happened in the past. Basically, if you look at the scale that one is talking about in our country, we have this is the largest human resource development exercise ever undertaken by any country in the history of mankind. So such is the enormity of the task, and therefore the more you do, the more seems to remain to be done. Am I audible clearly to all people, all participants?
Yes, that's all fine, Jayant. Everybody can hear you.
Oh, great. So I go on. So that's how this entire journey started. And among other things in the country, NSDC, which is the National Skill Development Corporation, the place where I work, it was created. It was created as a very different kind of a body, in the sense that we knew that people in India, the youth in India who come from bottom of the pyramid, who are quite poor, and they do not have the purchasing power to be able to afford expensive vocational education. So if you were to charge the vocational training on a cost plus basis, that these are my total costs, and we want to recover and make a margin, then it becomes it gets completely priced out for people who are the target audience at the bottom of the pyramid. So therefore, they created NSDC. And one of the major tasks assigned to NSDC was to use government funds and help them catalyze the creation of investment in India's skill development center, and largely coming from the industry, the private sector by and large, So the way NSDC constructed its portfolio, it said, we would give soft loans at lower rates of interest and longer repayment period, to people who want to invest in skills. The rate of interest at that point of time used to be about of the order of 12-13%, and through NSDC, these term loans for your capex are given at 6% per annum, which was half or slightly less than half the market rate at this point of time. And incidentally, it is still almost half the market rate of interest. The idea was to provide this as some kind of a viability funding, so that more and more people are encouraged to come and take it forward. So this was one main task assigned to the NSDC. So NSDC is actually, many of you think that it's a government organization, but actually it does use government funds and resources. But the composition of the company was deliberately kept of a kind which that it has 51% equity from industry and only 49% equity from Government of India. It was intentionally planned that way as a public-private partnership between the industry and the government, so that, from a work culture point of view, from a professional ethos point of view, from a responsive sensitivity point of view, from a velocity of decision-making point of view, it remains, a different kind of organization than what most government organizations are in the country for, So I think it is if you look at our board, it has many big-time players from Indian industry, and also some of the Government of India secretaries, including the secretary from the Skills Ministry. So that is what. This giving soft loans was one part of our job. The other part of the job was to create sector skill councils for each of the verticals. So idea was to have sector skill councils in the form of industry bodies. For example, auto would have one, hospitality would have yet another, retail would have another, and each of them, have a governing council which has a who's who of Indian industry participating there. And the job of these sector skill councils is to create national occupational standards for each of the key job roles, based on which the competency framework that job role requires is standardized and documented and articulated. So these national occupational standards for the relevant job roles are available to the people who we have trained, who are our training partners, and they draw curriculum based on this, and then get the courseware, and then the delivery happens. So these we have done a whole lot of things, but these are the two largest big ticket items that NSDC has been involved with. So when it comes to the training partners, today we have almost 250 training partners all across the country, in about 550 districts of India out of some 650 districts that we have. And they have created almost 3,500, about 4,000 training centers actually, because each training partner has multiple centers, And since our inception, we have trained more than 6 million, 6.5 million people since the inception of National Skill Development Corporation. And but this is still a small step looking at the mandate, because we have been given the mandate to train 150 million people out of 500 million people. So while we are supposed to work for the entire space, but our direct target through our own efforts, our training partners, is of the order of 150 million. So this is typically what we do. And at the apex level in the country, we have announced the Skill India mission as a national mission, and it has a governing council which is chaired by none other than the Prime Minister of the country. And then we have a steering committee which is chaired by the Minister for Skill Development, and it has all other relevant government ministries represented through their secretaries. Then we have a mission directorate at the third level, which is more like an executive committee, which is responsible for implementation and monitoring, which is chaired by the Secretary of Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and it has joint secretary level representation from other ministries. And I, as the CEO of N STC, am also a part of that. So this is the national skill development, the overall national mission. Its overall construct at 30,000 feet view. Then we also have a national skill development agency, where it is more of an anchor for the national skills qualification framework, which is that 10-level framework, the like of which many countries have adopted to give vertical mobility in the skill development space. So it is an anchor for that framework, and also it is some kind of a regulator, and a research body. Then the third important wing is the Directorate General of Training, which looks after ITIs that we have, the Industrial Training Institutes, and apprenticeship scheme running with them. I would just like to stop here and ask, and please give me some feedback if I'm going too slow or too fast.
Jen, I think that's fine. I'll just check if people have asked any questions at the moment. I think that everybody will kind of keep it till the end. But I think just to steer the discussion or to add a different aspect to your very, very good presentation, could you kind of just give us advice on what the advantages of the N STC route are for international providers looking to, get into the training market in India? And also, what do you see as the future of the training sector in India?
Yeah. So actually, let's talk about, while N STC does many things, but for international players, what kind of role N STC has played or could play, Yeah. That's a good question. Let's talk about UK as a country itself. Recently there was a visit led by NSDC, and it had CEOs of 15 out of the 40 sector skill councils who were there in UK last month. And their job was to talk to their counterparts in UK, and they have identified 82 job roles, cutting across 15 of our sectors, and sector skill councils, that is, and 11 of British sectors, and so they are working on those job roles which will describe the transnational standards, so that the common standards on which training would happen in India, which will also have equal acceptance in the UK. So that is one area where we are working on. Second area is that, we have, as I told you, almost 250 training providers with about 4,000 training centers. So a lot of individual colleges in UK, we could act as a bridge to connect you with the relevant, training providers in India for a possible collaboration, And, so far the kind of route which we have worked out with other countries is like there's been a lot of progress with Canada already made, where we have ensured this kind of a partnership between specific Canadian community colleges and vocational training providers with specific training, providers in India. And generally what happens, we arrange, and then all the commercial discussions happen directly between the Canadian or the British training provider and the relevant partner in India. But generally the kind of model which has been there, the kind of areas where this has worked better is that the overseas operators, including British, the kind of collaboration we have in mind is in the areas of training of trainers, training of assessors, and having a quality oversight and so on and so forth. These are the kind of areas, and the work that we have done with UK. I think on 3rd or 4th April, these 82 transnational job role courses would actually be launched in India and take it forward. But in terms of revenue stream, I think one normal question most of the people in the UK would have is that how would their revenue goals be taken care of? So there's no finality to what I'm saying, but in most cases you may not have a huge one-time payment in terms of a know-how fee and so on and so forth. So some of the expenses involved in here you'll have to take care of yourself. But also there are some people who have worked out subsequent revenue stream in the form of a royalty payment to the courses happening through such Canadian or Australian or British collaboration. So these are NSGC becomes a one-window clearance facility kind of thing. Where this kind of a collaboration is organized between India and international players.
I see. So basically, any UK training provider that's looking to enter the Indian market, would you say that the first stop would be the NSTC, that everything that they do and all their kind of interaction and looking to form their India strategy should be through the NSTC and all the assistance they provide?
Yeah, this is the recommended first stop, not the mandatory first stop. Kind of.
Yes.
There's nothing that stops a British training provider to directly engage with some other training provider in the country, kind of thing. There's nothing that stops. That can happen on its own. But the recommended route is through NSDC to expedite things and take it forward at a good velocity and removing irritants. And once that engagement between two individual training providers from both these countries happens, then we leave it to the normal business relationship between the two of them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's helpful to know, I think, and for our audience as well. I have a question about. I know that you worked on apprenticeship reforms, and we have a question on apprenticeship, specifically in IT apprenticeship. Could you tell us a bit about how established the apprenticeships are in the NSTC, specifically in IT apprenticeship?
See, when it comes to apprenticeship, I'll talk about at the country level, not necessarily through NSDC, kind of thing. See, apprenticeship scheme, in our country, the way it is constructed, it ranges from a typical of 6 months to 2 years, and with an industrial unit, and almost 20-25% of the curriculum is theory, which is the textbook kind of a stuff, and 75 to 80% is all applied, hands-on, working on the shop floors of the actual factory or the allied shop floors, and that kind of thing. The idea is to soil your hands and learn the harder way,
Yeah.
So this scheme was a complete non-starter in the country till recently, and I had the good fortune to champion these reforms at the country level, and most of these reforms have happened. They have been incorporated in an act of parliament, which has been passed by both the houses. So all the reforms that the industry and various players wanted in the apprenticeship scheme have actually happened, and now it is a very industry-friendly apprenticeship scheme. And so far, the first year when we had the new scheme running, and in the limited window that we have had, we've already had 10 to 15% increase in the number of apprentices vis-a-vis last year. So I think this is a scheme where there's a lot of future, and going forward, NSGC would also play an active role in ensuring that, if not all, then at least some of the trainees who undergo vocational training at our training providers are also given the apprenticeship opportunities, kind of thing. And, now they get decent stipend, and for MSME sectors, for the medium and small scale sector, the stipend also gets reimbursed by the government, subject to a maximum of 50%. And basically it is linked to the minimum wages, and industrial units are free to draw their own curriculum for apprenticeship and all that. So lots of changes which almost the entire wish list of the industry for reforms in the apprenticeship regime has been granted by the government, and now it is for the industry to respond, and people like N STC would also play an active role in making that happen.
That's really good news to hear, actually, Ren. Thank you. Question on what level of funding is available then in apprenticeship? You just spoke a little bit about that. Can I just ask you to
Yeah, so apprenticeship basically what happens, apprenticeship is essentially an industry-driven scheme, because apprentices join the industrial unit and learn there, and bulk of the time, as I said, 75% to 80% of the time, working on actual machines, actual shop floor, and so on and so forth. So far, from a student perspective, in the first year of apprenticeship, they get 70% of the minimum wages of that state. Second year, this figure becomes 80%. And if at all an apprenticeship lasts longer, then the third year it becomes 90% of the minimum wages prescribed by the respective state governments. So that's a payment to apprentices. And whatever money industrial units have to pay to the apprentices is actually reimbursed, big time, in the sense that 40% of 50% of these payments are also reimbursed by Ministry of Skill Development, and the first preference which is given is to manufacturing sector for the MSME units. So other than that, it is largely an industry-funded scheme, and we are also encouraging a lot of training providers to provide apprenticeship opportunities to the students who are passing out from there in the industrial units near about, in the same geography.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. In terms of other questions, actually, there's just one or two more questions, but I just wanted to ask you whether you wanted to speak a little bit more about any other aspects of N STC that we haven't. Because I
sure.
Questions before you finished your entire presentation. So thank you for accommodating us.
Yeah. So basically, no, it's all right. Let's keep the format flexible. NSDC also took up through KPMG a study of basically lots of sectors which are as to what kind of skill gaps exist there. And as per that, our real estate, construction, and building vertical has the maximum amount of skill gaps going forward, followed by the retail industry, then transportation and logistics, then beauty and wellness, and then perhaps furniture and furnishings, followed by tourism and hospitality and travel, then textile and clothing, and so on and so forth. So these are the big time sectors, where such a study, these kind of skill gaps have emerged through the study that we did in KPMG. And we have also done district-wise skill gap studies for almost all the major states in the country. So you go to any of the 650 districts and you are able to get a fair idea as to what kind of skill gaps exist in that country. And we had the best of breed consultants do that, and so on and so forth. Recently we have also revised our funding guidelines in SDC so that more and more corporates could come on our board. And we also incentivized, our training partners, those who provide employment more than a certain percentage, have become entitled to get a lower rate of interest. Even it can go from 6% to as low as 3%. And similarly, when it comes to people who, the training providers who provide higher percentage of employment to students, then that I also explained. But when people who do not meet the targets that we have given them in terms of number of people to be skilled, then this rate may go up beyond 5-6% also. So these kind of things we have done. These sector skill councils that we have, we are also working jointly with them. Only yesterday at Bombay, we had Mumbai, we had a meeting where we had shared with them their how do we rejuvenate sector skill councils and make them more relevant to the country in terms of making them more industry oriented, more market centric, and how do we ensure that they are governed better and they are committed to their annual plans and so on and so forth, and also rationalize the job roles that they have set up, and the overall rationalization of sector skill councils, because there's a belief that we have far too many. So these kind of changes which have happened. We have also talked about creating an executive decision-making layer between the governing council and the CEO in each of those sector skill councils. So I think these kind of changes have happened to a very, very significant extent. But as I said earlier, that it's such a complicated space and such a large sphere, enormity is such. Then the more you do, the more seems to remain to be done. So this is all that I wanted to say. It's good that it became participative even before I could finish this. Anything else that you have, you're free to ask questions. I also have my colleague Mr. Rajeev Mathur, who looks after standards and quality assurance in N STC, just joined me. He was stuck up in bad traffic, therefore he could not join. Otherwise, I requested him to join the this session right from the beginning.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. This is Rajeev Mathur.
Hello, Rajeev. Good that you could join us. Sorry about the traffic, but that's always the problem. It doesn't, it stops for no one basically.
So I think London and Delhi are they rub shoulder to shoulder. They in terms of they can compete as to whose traffic is worse.
Yeah, I think Delhi might win just by a small margin.
How is the congestion charge working in London? Sorry to digress.
Ajay, let's take that offline, Jayant. Let me just because there's one or two more questions, and then that people are quite keen to ask you, if I may. So first of all, the report that you mentioned that you've done with KPMG sounds really, really fascinating. Would you be able to share that with us? Because there are a few people who are interested in knowing more about it.
Most of these studies are available on our website itself.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So we can
direct like an open book. NSGC is like an open book. Anybody who wants to get some details are there on the website.
Okay, that's really good to know. So that's fine. We can direct them to do that. And also, I think I don't want to repeat the question, but I think people just want to understand a bit better. And the question is similar to what we asked, is that does NSTC help to establish UK training providers in India? And I think what you mentioned is that you encourage and connect the UK training providers to the Indian counterparts and then let them take it from there. Am I right?
Yeah. I think that's what I said. And I will. It's good that Rajeev has come at this time, although I did answer it earlier. But Rajeev, maybe you will have a slightly different articulation of what value proposition NSDC brings on the table for UK companies to connect and have working relationships with the Indian training providers.
The model that we use here is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think Jayant has already shared that. So the model is that the UK companies will have to look for an Indian partner, and that Indian partner jointly they'll have to submit a proposal to N STC for opening this skill center. The objective of this particular skill center would be to create trainers and assessors and then support this Make in India and making India the skill capital of the world. So there are 3-4 clear agendas that we have in front of. So the foreign entity is supposed to bring the technical know-how of the trainer program, train the assessor program, etc. And the technical expertise comes from the UK counterparts, and the Indian partner will be the one who is going to implement. So here the model is that the UK companies, they don't have to do any upfront investments into this whole piece. All that they have to do is investment in terms of the salaries that they give to the people who will be deployed here. And then the whole model actually works on a royalty model where whatever the training is happening by this whole system, there's a percentage of royalty that will accrue back to the UK partner. Because here, if you look at it, the volumes that we are talking of are enormous. Overall, 400 million people have to be skilled by 2022. So numbers are enormous. You have to think of what kind of capacities you can create here, what kind of monies that you are looking at in terms of the revenues, and you have to work that with the Indian partner, create that kind of capacities, and work the whole proposition. Now, one very important thing is that when you submit this proposal to us, that Indian partner will still be both the capex and the opex, and the technical resources who are going to be coming to India. Their economy class travel and the stay. Stay again is not in a 5-star, but in some good guest house which is being done by the Indian partner, that can be taken as the opex cost in the whole piece. So the responsibility of the UK partner remains only in giving the salaries back to the people, and then working out a model of taking the royalties from the Indian partner into the whole piece.
I see.
So I just wanted to add here that there is one fundamental difference in the vocational training sector of UK and India that must be factored in by all training providers who want to have a business presence here.
Right.
One is that you are a low volume and high cost player. High cost in relative terms to India. And what you offer is of a high quality. So you are a high quality, high cost, a low volume player. In our country, we are a very, very large volume, basically, and low cost, because of since we operate at bottom of the pyramid when it comes to our students.
Yeah.
Therefore, it has to be a cost model. And when it comes to quality, the current quality levels are not high, but we also aspire to build higher quality levels. So I think there are fundamental difference in the business models of UK and India, or for that matter, between any developed country, like UK, Canada, Switzerland, US, Australia, and India. So unless you tweak your business model, it doesn't work. So very clearly, in any engagement that you make, initially there'll have to be some investment in the relationship, and revenues would come later as the volumes build up, and and that kind of a thing. It could be in the form of royalty, it could be in any other form that is mutually agreed between the two partners. But the markets are very different, the realities are very different. So only people who are prepared to tweak their models and work, not try to impose and thrust their business models onto ours, but look at the realities of our market, of our country, and then recalibrate it for India. Those are the players who will succeed.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to reiterate that that's a really good point, because that's one of the key pieces of advice that we share at the UK IBC, that you need to tweak your UK operating ways and UK model, Indianize it if you want to succeed in India. So thank you for just reiterating that. Sorry, Rajeev.
So no, I was just saying that on a very similar model, we have just launched 4 centers with collaboration with Canada. Exactly on the same model, and 6 more are on the way. I think in next 2 to 3 months, then they'll also get operational.
Right, that's really good to hear. So hopefully we can, build up the volume of UK India models as well. Yeah, to at least
So
to
on,
kind of.
on the lighter side, please hurry up. Otherwise, this another Commonwealth country will, have
Yes,
the early movers advantage. Early movers advantage.
move quickly so that you can capitalize on the exciting and huge opportunity in the training sector. Am I right? Yep.
I did mention.
I see you mentioned it.
Thank you. I think
I was just trying to say one more thing. Just
give this data on that.
yeah. So on 3rd or 4th April, these transnational standards are getting launched by the sector skill councils of UK and India. At that time, we were planning to have some MOUs with all the British colleges who are also keen to work with us. Plus, we are going to also have sign-ups with Pearson and City and Guilds. The whole model is being worked out. The whole mechanism has been worked out, and if more colleges are interested, actually AOC is working with us on that particular bit. But if more colleges are interested, we can have our MOUs getting signed up on that particular day, the 3rd or 4th of April.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we
It will
can.
be a UK event that we'll do here.
Very good, Rajeev. We can spread the word to our database of UK training providers and let them know it's not far down the line, so they'll have to really ramp up their work if they want to get there in time. One last question, sorry, before we wrap up. The questions just come in. It's about whether UK assessors and verifier certificates are recognized by the N STC and by India in general.
So the model that we have built out is as follows. So currently there is a certificate which is being issued, which has a Government of India logo on that, Sector Skill Council logo on that. So what we are now proposing is as follows. So suppose there is a stick welder who is already in India, right? Who has already got a certification from the Indian system. Now, after doing benchmarking with UK, we find that there are 2 noses which were not there. I'm just trying to give an example, right?
Yeah.
So the college can take up, or the consortium which is getting built up here with the Indian partner can take up the responsibility of skilling that person into those 2 missing noses. And then back to back, we have done a tie-up with City and Guilds and Pearson, who will, work with our sector skill councils in giving that particular additional certification, and the certification is already there, will be given a recognition and followed by, those 2 noses, and there will be a consolidated certificate which can be later on given to an individual, or a person can take complete training onto the Indian and the UK noses combined. So both mechanisms are being worked out, but so the psyche of the Indian people is that they want to see the Government of India logo on the certificates. All our certificates have the Government of India logo. So here we are talking about joint certification, where we'll have the logos of the participating organizations also on that certificate, along with the Government of India logo on the top. That's the model that we are trying to build. But if somebody says that we have to go and work in Middle East, for example, right? And in Middle East, we would say, okay, the only UK certificate could be taken, and then for that, a person will have to apply to the UK certifying body and take an exclusive certificate on his own expense.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So on the India side, moving towards joint certification, which will hopefully simplify matters. So that's good. Thank you very much, Rajeev. I think I just wanted to add that UKIBC has a skills and education sector, and you obviously know about that, and people are aware of it. But we work very closely with NSTC and with FICCI to take forward this work and to help UK training providers succeed in India. So do let us know if there are more questions along that line as well. I'm going to wrap up now, because we've just gone a bit above time since it was so interesting. Thank you very much for your time, Jayant and Rajeev. I hope this webinar was very valuable to you. And for any feedback or comments from the participants about today's session, please do get in touch with us. We actually want to tell you that we're going to be holding a seminar on the 9th of March on opportunities for higher education institutions in India. So a kind of continuation of this. Please do visit our website for further information and to register for this. And I think that's it for now. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. Yeah, and special thank you again, Jayant and Rajeev.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.